Hungarian Folk Tales. The Gold Coin and the Hat. I want to tell you the story of 3 young men and a hat. The 3 young men were all big bearded fellows, and one day they decided that the time had come to go out and seek their fortunes in the great wide world. They walked and walked until they came to a little village, and as they neared the village, they met an old man. And one of the young men said, "How many days are there in the world, old man?" "One less with today, young man," the old man replied. "And are there any good men left in the world?" "Roses still bloom even when they're surrounded by weeds." Now that was clever, the young man said. "I'll ask you one more question. What does an old man have under his hat? Come to the inn, young men, and I'll tell you there." The young men were penniless, but they still went with the old man. But the old man was the first to enter, and he told the innkeeper to keep pouring them wine until they had 5 florins worth. So all 4 men took a seat at the table, and the innkeeper poured wine, and they drank it and had a very jolly time indeed. But when they had drunk 5 florins worth, the innkeeper stopped serving them and politely asked, "Now, gentlemen, who will pay for all this fine wine?" The young men would have willingly paid, but they were penniless. "So then the hat will pay," the old man said. And he took off his hat, shook it, and a gold coin fell out. The young men were very surprised by this sight and keen to get their hands on the old man's valuable hat. Then all they would have to do was to shake it, and the ground would be covered in gold coins. They pleaded and appealed to the old man to sell them his hat and to name his price. "Very well," the old man said. "You can see that I am indeed an old man, and so 500 florins would be enough for the few years I have left. So that is my price for the hat, young sirs." The young gentlemen all ran to the count and asked to borrow 500 florins, and the count was happy to comply. So they paid the old man the price for the hat, and he went home. Then the hearty young fellows continued to eat and drink and make merry until a very late hour that night. And when the time came to pay, they shook the old man's hat, but nothing fell out. Not even a single gold coin. What were the poor fools to do? They could not pay, and so the innkeeper made them all stay and work to pay for the wine they had drunk that night. The moment the innkeeper let them go, they hurried to find the old man who had sold them the hat. "Let's go and look for him in the village, and we'll teach that old man a lesson for cheating us so." The old man got wind of their arrival and tried to hide all over the house, but his wife still found him wherever he hid. Then his wife said to him at last, "You silly old fool, don't try and hide. It's much better if you pretend to be dead. Lie on the bench and I shall put a sheet over you, and when the young men come, I shall tell them that you're dead, and they will not be able to do a thing with a dead man." So that's exactly what they did, and the wife began to weep for her dead husband. "Oh, my dearest darling husband, why did you die and leave me here all alone?" When the young men appeared, they asked the wife why she was crying so. "What happened? Why are you crying, old lady?" "How could I not cry, my dears? My husband is lying dead on the bench, and I am left here to fend for myself alone. But do not mourn his loss, for he was a terrible rogue." But then one of the young men sighted a stick in the corner of the room, and he could not resist giving the old man's body a prod. "Take that, you scoundrel, for the money you stole from us." Then the old man leapt up and put his hands together in thanks. "Oh, God bless you, gentlemen. Behold, now I believe in the miraculous power of the stick. Listen here. I was walking in the fields one day when I saw a dead dog lying there. I prodded the dead dog with this selfsame stick and it jumped up and ran away. But now I know better than ever that this stick has the power to perform miracles. Wife, give these young men all we possess and we will keep only this stick. Then, when a rich man dies, I will raise him back from the dead and be richly rewarded for my miraculous deed. Not so fast, the young men said. We don't want your possessions, we want your miraculous stick. The old man was not willing to hand it over at first, but then he agreed. You made fools of us once before, but never again. God bless you, old man. Then the old man laughed and gave them the stick. The young men were walking back through the village when they passed the house of the Count. There they saw a hearse and 6 horses about to set off in a funeral procession. So the young gentleman asked who was about to be buried. The people told them, why, the young Countess, of course. There you can see her mother, father, and handsome bridegroom standing behind the coffin. The young men did not waste a minute and ran up to the old Countess. They demanded that she open the coffin that instant so they might raise the young Countess from the dead. Then the old Countess did as the young men said and promised them all the treasure she had if only they could bring her daughter back from the dead. So one of the young men approached the coffin and tapped the young Countess lightly on the throat with a miraculous stick. She looked dead 1 minute and was alive the next. Everyone was delighted and now they would have a wedding instead of a wake. And they all ate and drank and had a very good time. The young men received a cart full of gold for their troubles and were so happy that they even gave the old man a sack of gold when they passed his house again. Strange as it may sound, they never tried their luck with the stick a second time because they still thought that the old man might have tricked them after all. So they all went back to school to complete their studies. So that is how this story ends. If you liked it, tell it to your friends. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Shepherd and the Snake. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a poor shepherd boy. The only thing the shepherd boy possessed was a little donkey, and he spent his days guarding the mayor's flock of sheep. He sat watching the flock one day and thinking how unfair it was that some people had money and were rich, while others had none and were poor. He sat thinking and thinking when he suddenly heard the sound of crying. "Help me! Help me!" The boy followed the sound of crying and walked to a hole in the ground, where he came upon a yellow-bellied snake wriggling in a fire. "Help me, shepherd boy, and I will soon repay the favour." So the boy held out his stick, and the yellow-bellied snake slithered up it and out of the fiery flames. Then the snake said, "Follow me, and you should know that my father is the king of all snakes." The yellow-bellied snake slithered along, and the young shepherd walked quickly behind. He left his donkey to watch over the sheep. The boy followed the snake until they found themselves in a forest, where the yellow-bellied snake suddenly slithered under a flat stone. The snake shouted back, Push the stone away and follow me." The young shepherd did as the snake had said and revealed steps going down into the ground. And he walked down and down and down until he arrived in a beautiful diamond meadow. "This is my father's palace." And the gate to the palace was guarded by 2 very large snakes. There the yellow-bellied snake slithered in and the young shepherd followed close behind. They passed through one room after the other until they arrived at the throne room that sparkled with silver and gems. The walls were studded with diamonds and everything was decorated in precious metal. The Snake King was sitting proudly on an enormous throne, and when he wanted to give his servants an order, he would simply flick his tail and bells would ring. Then the yellow-bellied snake hurried up to the king and embraced him. "Father dear, don't harm this poor shepherd boy because he saved me from the fire." "Now, young shepherd boy, you may choose from 2 things as your reward for saving my son. You can learn to speak to all the animals, or I can give you a bag of gold." The poor shepherd boy thought hard because he was sorely tempted by the promise of riches, but he would never ever have the chance to learn the language of the animals again. And so that is what he chose. "Come here, my child," said the Snake King. So the young shepherd boy approached the fearsome snake, and the king hissed in his ear, and he instantly understood what the king was saying to his snake son. So then the poor shepherd boy bid farewell to the yellow-bellied snake and his father the king, and started to walk back the way he had come. He walked on until he came to the beautiful meadow, climbed back up the underground steps, and re-emerged into his own world once more. Then he herded his sheep up and sat down to reflect on all that had happened to him that day. And as he sat there, 2 tiny birds flew up and landed in the top of a tree where they sat talking to each other. Did you know? If that poor shepherd boy only knew what lies at the foot of this tree, he would not stay poor for 1 day more. But the young shepherd heard this and understood all they said. So he swiftly drove his sheep back to their owner, picked up his sharpest axe, and walked back to the forest to the tree where he had sat. And he dug until he discovered, to his great delight, a big pot of gold. As evening fell, he took the gold home and never had to watch the mare's sheep again. Then he soon bought a beautiful house with plenty of land, married his bride, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Foolish Man. Many, many years ago, in a land far, far away, there lived a man and his wife. And I'm sorry to tell you that the man was not very clever. In fact, the man was a fool. And every day his wife had to tell him what to do and how to do it. The man and his wife had a cow, and one day his wife said, "Why don't you take the cow to market to sell it?" So the man dressed her foolish husband in his best clothes, and he left for the market with the cow. It was a very hot summer's day, and a cloud of flies began to bother the cow and make it run back and forth all over the place. And as they were walking, they met a man with a pig. "Kind sir, wouldn't you prefer to swap your troublesome cow for this pig?" "Oh, but of course I would," he said, and they made the exchange. So now the foolish man had a pig, but the pig was harder to control than the cow had been, and the foolish man did not like it at all. And as they were walking, they met a man carrying a goose. "Kind sir, wouldn't you prefer to swap your troublesome pig for this goose?" "Oh, but of course I would." Well, the goose was no better. It made a terrible mess, its feathers stuck to the foolish man's clothes, and he soon grew tired of carrying it. As they walked, they passed a man by the side of the road who was selling sharpening stones, and the man said, "Kind sir, wouldn't you prefer to swap your troublesome goose for this sharpening stone?" "Oh, but of course I would." So the foolish man was now left with nothing more than a sharpening stone, and he turned around and set off back home. And as he walked, he passed a pond with ducks swimming on it. The foolish man thought he would like to take a duck home for his wife. So he threw the sharpening stone, it sank into the pond, and all the ducks flew away. Now what am I going to do? No cow, no pig, no goose, no sharpening stone, no nothing. So he took off all his clothes and waded into the pond to find the sharpening stone. He searched the pond but could not find it anywhere. And when he came out of the water, he discovered that someone had stolen all of his clothes. So the foolish man was forced to walk home naked. The foolish man was very hungry when he got home, and so he cut himself a slice of bread and went down into the cellar to have a drink of wine. So he put the bread on the step and looked around to see that the dog had made off with it. He then threw the wine tap at the dog, so all the wine spilled out of the barrel onto the floor. A goose sat in the corner hatching eggs, and the goose said, "Gaggle, gaggle, gaggle." "You're going to tell my wife?" "Gaggle, gaggle, gaggle, hiss, hiss." And the goose went on making a terrible din. So the foolish man grabbed the goose, wrung its neck, and threw it out into the yard. Then he poured a bag of flour into the wine and some feathers, rolled around in it, and sat on the eggs. His wife then came down into the cellar and said, "What on earth is going on here?" She looked around at the spilled wine, the flour and the feathers and saw something sitting on the eggs. "What kind of monster is this? You had better say something before I knock your head off. It's me, dear wife. Don't hurt me." "Where's the cow?" "I swapped it for a pig." "So where's the pig?" "I swapped it for a goose." "So where's the goose?" "I swapped it for a sharpening stone." "So where's the sharpening stone?" "I threw it into the pond. I wanted to hit a duck so I could bring it home to you." "And where are your clothes?" "Somebody stole them while I was looking for the sharpening stone." "Oh, you foolish man." and she pulled him off the eggs and gave him the beating of his life. The foolish man's wife never sent him anywhere again after that, and did everything herself because it was safer that way. And that is the end of my story.